right, we're going to take a look at color in a new and different way. You've already had a chance to look at the art elements in focus, the color page here on page 30. You already know a lot about color. Honestly, you've been dealing with color since you were born. In fact, some of these colors you probably saw on your nursery room walls. So let's take a look at these colors and their relationships, which you might not have talked about as much. The first thing you want to keep in mind is that there are three groupings of color. There are primary colors, there are secondary colors, and there are tertiary colors. And those colors have relationships. So they're all called hues. Red, yellow, blue are hues in the color spectrum. Orange, green, violet are hues, as are blue, violet, blue, green, red, orange, red, violet, yellow, green, and yellow, orange. But those different hues have relationships to each other on something called a color wheel. And when you look at this color wheel, it's intuitive. It makes sense. You understand that if you have yellow and you have red, that you're going to be making orange. You get this just by looking at it. But it's a little harder to actually mix the colors, and it's a little harder to think about color relationships beyond the visual connections that occur when they're right next to each other. So we're going to go through the exercise of creating a color wheel. The first thing I recommend that you do is that you label your color wheel. So I'm going to mimic the one here on this page. I'm going to put red right up here at the top. So we have primary colors, red, blue, yellow, secondary colors, violet, orange, and green. And they're all located on the color wheel like I did on the tiny one off to the left. The next thing that we're going to do is recognize that if you mix red with violet, you're going to get a tertiary color called red-violet. If you mix blue with violet, you're going to get a tertiary color called blue-violet. Notice that the name of the color, that hyphenated name, always begins with the primary, then the secondary. So blue and green make blue-green. All right, so you get the picture now here of how these colors lay out. We have a number of different colored pencils in your kit. We have the three primary colors, and we have the three secondary colors. We also have black and white. So I'm going to actually take the primary colors and color them in first. When you're working with colored pencils, you can do one coat and you get a nice kind of soft, even look to it. But if you want rich color, if you want juicy, delicious color, you actually have to take the time to do a second layer. Don't try and hit your colored pencils to the paper with such force the first time around that you're going to try and get the darkness right off the bat. It's always better to layer them in. All right, I've got the primary colors in place, and now it's time to put in the secondary colors. Because our kit does have these secondary colors, we're going to go ahead and use them. Notice how rich I got these colors here. I actually took 3 coats of the color. But it's worth it in the end. Colored pencil is a fantastic medium for drawing, but often we put them on so lightly that they feel weak or childish. But you can actually get some amazing results with colored pencils. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pop the orange in here. Comes layer number 1. The secondary colors in place. Now it's time to work on the tertiary colors. And you might be sitting there thinking, but Ms. Bowker, you gave me red, yellow, blue, and you gave me green, violet, and orange, but I don't have a red violet. I don't have a blue violet. And you're right, you don't. However, you can mix colored pencils. It's true. You can layer the colors, and visually those colors will mix together and do some pretty cool things. Some tips for that. Always begin with the lighter value color. So if I'm going to make a yellow-green, I'm going to start by putting a layer of yellow down. Now remember, to get nice, rich, juicy color, we have to do multiple layers anyway. So I'm going to put a yellow layer down here. This becomes my base layer. I always start with the lighter value color because it's easier to go darker, much more difficult to make something lighter. So I'm going to have this layer down of yellow, just one coat down there, and I'm going to put in a light touch of green. So I'm going to put this green on with a very light touch. And do you see how that yellow and that green are mixing together on the surface of the paper? Now, the pigments aren't actually combining like you would with paint. It's happening because we see color because of reflected light. And so the light is reflecting off of the yellow, the light is reflecting off of the green, and it's creating a yellow-green effect. Some just nice light application of the green because it's so dark in comparison to that yellow. And then I might even come back in with the yellow as a means of blending those together a little bit. I can also use my blending pencil. Now this is called a colorless blender because the tip of it actually doesn't have any color. If I were to draw here, I would see nothing. But I can use that to scumble the materials together a bit, just working in a circular motion to blend those together. And now I have a yellow-green where I didn't have a yellow-green before. Super! So now we have all of the colors in place. Using that layering technique, I have all of those tertiary colors. Now, did you know that if you mix colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, like red and green, that you're going to get something called a neutral color? So let's give it a try. I'm going to put a layer of red down because that's my lighter value between those two colors. And then I'm going to put a layer of green on. And what you're going to notice is that it's going to start to look a little brownish or a little gray as soon as I put that green on top, because the way that the wavelengths are reacting to each other as they're reflecting off from the surface, they're kind of counteracting each other and making something called a neutral. Neutral colors are browns and grays. You don't actually have any browns in your kit, but if you needed to, you can always mix a neutral by working with two opposite colors. It's also a nice way to darken a yellow by adding a little bit of violet to it. That's a little bit more pleasing to the eye than if you put black in your yellow. It tends to come out kind of muddy and gross. So now I have this brownish version. Oops, I grabbed white. Sorry about that. I meant to grab my colorless blender. Now I have this brownish color here that's going to act as my neutral center. And it's time to move on to the value strip at the bottom of the page. The value is the lightness or darkness of a color. So if you think about what you learned over here, you have the hue. It's a hue plus white equals a tint. The hue plus black equals a shade. With colored pencils, you can do some pretty cool things. I can just grab this green colored pencil and I can actually put different amounts of pressure on my pencil and go from dark by pushing hard and then lightening up my pressure and getting all the way over here to pretty light, just with color and pressure. But that's not what this value strip is. Okay, that is one way to approach a value strip with colored pencil. What I'm going to ask you to do is actually put a layer of a color, and I'm choosing green. You can choose any of your colors if you'd like. You can even mix colors to get the color that you want. And I'm going to put this sort of mid pressure green everywhere on my value strip. Then I'm going to start adding in some black and some white. I'm going to do a second layer of green here in the center because that's where my pure hue is going to live. So whatever color you pick, you'll put it strong in the middle just by itself with no mixing. That's where you're going to put your hue. And then over here, you're going to be adding in here white. So that's the light side of my value strip, using the hue, using some pencil pressure, and using some white. The dark side is going to be adding blacks in. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've got the hue, and I'm just going to add a touch of black in here. Just a touch to get it a little bit darker, smokier looking here. Then I'm going to add in a little more black to this panel. And then I'm going to add in further amounts of black in the last panel all the way to the left. Then I can use my colorless blender to even things out, or even add a little bit more pigment of green on top as a way to blend things as needed. Let's take a peek at how that looks here. And a little bit more green on top to blend that in. That's a nice dark green, isn't it? Nice and rich green. And I'll use my colorless blender. Send those pigments together all the way across that value scale. And there we have it. The color wheel and the value strip are now complete.